Hi everyone, great to be talking to you again. I'm excited. This is our last session where we'll be talking about the novice toolbox and we'll be moving on to the professional toolbox next time. So today I'm going to finish up talking about professional learning communities. I'll finish up a couple last tools, show you some whiteboard cycles, and then we will graduate. So going back to PLC, I want to quickly review because it's been a while. So I've been spending a lot of time throughout my career since I went to turnaround schools learning about professional learning community work. So I talked about the 7-step cycle, which really revolve around the 4 questions of PLC. What exactly do students need to be learning? How are we going to know they learned it? How are we going to intervene if they don't learn it? And how are you going to extend when they do learn it? And those 7 steps really help a PLC function. And I spent a little bit of time talking about assessments that we created in the past. So with this last session, I want to really talk about the culture of a professional learning community. I want to talk about some mindsets that I've learned over the years that really help with PLC. And a great way to break down those mindsets is to look at what's really supposed to be meant by a professional learning community. And I want to start with what each one is not. So for example, professional. It doesn't mean you do whatever you damn well please. There are a lot of people that equate professional with leave me alone. I'm a professional. So you must leave me alone to do what I do. I always like to equate teachers to doctors. They're both, they work with people, they're a skilled practice, they're an art. And I really don't want to go to the doctor that says, this is my office, I'm the doctor, I know everything, and I'm not going to learn from anybody else. I'm going to close my door to my doctor's office, and that's it. I'm not going to read any peer-reviewed journals. I get to decide exactly what I do. And if I believe bleeding someone to cure them works, well then, damn it, I'm going to bleed someone to cure them. Second, and this is very popular in many school districts, the higher up you go, the more you wear a suit and tie and the bigger words you use. And as long as you know the buzzwords, you're going to be promoted through the ranks. And so a professional is someone that dresses up nicely, says the right things, has a title. That's not what's meant by a professional in PLC work. And finally, professional doesn't mean that you agree with what everyone says that's above you. Sadly, we have a hierarchy where you do what the person above you tells you to do. Well, the principal says this, so I got to do this. Well, my academic coordinator says this, I got to do this. Well, the superintendent says this, I got to do this. That's not what a professional is in a PLC. Blindly following the person above you. In fact, I want to challenge you and say that you have a responsibility in a PLC to question and argue with the people above you in a hierarchy. That's how you learn. That's how you figure things out. You learn together. And you can't learn if someone above you is saying, this is the way it is. Because usually what they're talking about is tradition of this is the way it's always been. So then, what does professional mean? First of all, it means all of us use research in our daily decision making. Now, there is a huge amount of research and education, so there's a lot to pull from. But there's a difference between saying, I like this technique, that's why I use it, I think it works because I have, well, this anecdotal evidence, to I am doing small groups because John Hattie states that when you have kids in 4 or 5 to 1, that the engagement level increases significantly. That is a different type of decision making than what we commonly do in classrooms. If there's 2 doctors and one says, I use research in my daily decision making, and one says, I kind of think this works, let me use this instead, which doctor are you going to go to? The second way of being professional in a PLC is using evidence to support our decisions. That's all about comparative evidence. Let's say I'm working with a team of 7 teachers, like my biology team. And all 7 of us have a common goal. We're trying to reach towards that goal. We're using techniques in our classroom. And we come together and we compare our results. My results were 50%. 50% of my kids met the standard. Ms. Cornrump's results are 90% of kids met the standard. Our kids deserve the strategies that Ms. Cornrump used. And there are certain specific teacher actions that she took in her room that I didn't take, that if I try those based on evidence that she had better results, I will have met more kids' needs. Now, maybe I don't do it right. Maybe it doesn't necessarily work for my students, and so instead of my scores going up, they flatline. But that's the experimental decision making we make as a professional in a PLC. It's learning by doing. We try the techniques because our kids deserve the best. And finally, we need to be clinical to the extreme. We cannot take our comparative data that gives us evidence and take it personally. If we take it personally, then we're not going to take actions. We also can't blame the outside world. Oh, well, my kids are just low. Oh, well, I've got a bunch of ELL kids. Oh, well, I have a bunch of SPED kids. Okay, cool. So now let's work together to figure out what works for our students. All of these are external things that we can't necessarily control. But here's one thing I know that we can all control: our teacher actions in our classrooms. And if we use evidence and research and we try to change our teacher actions to meet more kids' needs because of working together as a team, that's what a professional is in a PLC. All right, onward to learning. Learning doesn't mean you sit in a room for sit and get PD. It's not only about the kids learning and not the adults. So let's say you've got a great intervention system. You've got some good tier 2 and tier 3. However, your adults don't meet and discuss instruction and try to figure out what works for kids. Remember, if you've got a team of 7 people, every kid deserves to benefit from the techniques from all 7 of those people. And so learning just isn't about the kids, it's also about the adults. This is something that permeates all schools, I believe. The idea that the lowly, infamous bad teachers learn the right ways from the good teachers. And I just don't buy into that. You can learn from everybody. I learned some of the greatest techniques that I've used from first-year teachers coming in that tried something that I gave up on a long time ago, and they made it successfully work for them, and so I learned from them. We still look at the data as evidence. However, it's not about, oh, well, you've got a 90%, therefore share all the good things that you do, and all the rest of us have to feel bad. And if learning feels that way at your school, if you've got a few experts and then the lowly people, you're not a PLC school. That is the worst thing that could happen to adults and the worst thing that can happen to kids. You know, people perpetuate this idea of it's about the kids, it's not about the adults. It's about the adults too. If the adults aren't in that environment where they can learn and prosper and learn in good ways and try new things, or they're just made to feel bad because, well, it's about the kids, it's not about you, how's anyone going to learn in that environment? So what does learning really mean? It means we stop judging everyone. Now, this is from the top on down, but I think some of the most judgiest people in our schools tend to be teachers. We judge each other. Specifically, we judge each other when it comes to classroom behavior. You know, we're all on different journeys in our ability to create a classroom environment. But instead of helping someone that's struggling with that, we judge them. We see a classroom of kids yelling and screaming and running around, and we go, hey, that's not my problem, at least it's not me. And we judge that person. And I think this is also very important. We got to stop judging ourselves. If a lesson didn't go so well, or the behavior in your classroom is just out of sorts, stop feeling bad. Get clinical. Think, what are my teacher actions that are leading to this? Who can I learn from? Who's got great classroom management environment that I want to learn from? And then spend your preps in that person's classroom learning. It means we stop ignoring. If there's little things that we think we can help with, we don't ignore it for the sake of getting along. Oh, well, I want everyone to like me, and that person, I got this technique that could help them out, but I don't want them to judge me. I'm worried about what they'll think, so I'm just going to ignore it. No, man. We help, we assist, we give feedback, we suggest, and we never attack someone's face or back. And here's my favorite part of this. We ask for feedback from everyone. I ask for feedback from everyone. Even when I'm giving model lessons now, or I'm trying new instructional techniques, I will stop at the end and I will ask for feedback from kids. What could I have done better? Instructionally coaching a teacher, at the end I will always ask, what could I have done better? I'm trying to set up that environment where it's okay to help people. And if you as a leader aren't constantly asking for feedback from everybody, I'm talking from the custodian. I'm talking about from the instructional aide. If you think in terms of hierarchy and I'll only learn from people I view up here, you have really cut off your ability to learn. Everybody learns from each other, and I really need to add this in there with a positive approach. As soon as things start to get negative, then nobody can learn. It's the positive approach that matters. It doesn't mean that we go along to get along. It doesn't mean we ignore what the data says, but it means this. Everybody can contribute something positive, and we're going to learn from everybody. There's no judgment involved. And here's what they don't tell you. This is extremely hard to do and set up. Extremely hard. But once you got it, this learning culture feels incredible. It just feels great. Imagine coming to work and no one judges anyone else and everybody learns from everybody else. And here's ultimately what it's about. You can't just talk about it. I'm talking about this culture. I have to go out and try to create that culture through daily decisions and actions that I take. And if every single person at a school takes those daily actions and they don't just talk about it, but they really act on it, ask everyone around you, hey, what can I do? What can I do? How can I improve? How can I improve? Then you can create that culture. It takes a bunch of individuals together. I think it's also important to think about the learning in terms of kids. We teach, we improve instruction, and we reteach. And that's sort of that cycle, right? We teach, we improve our instruction, and we reteach. We do it as teams. And we're trying to get to 100% of our kids to attain the essential curriculum long term. Long term is really important. This type of instruction doesn't just ask kids to learn until the test. It asks kids to learn till the end of time. When you teach essentials in a deeper way, you'll find that kids learn more. But we have this culture in our schools where, hey, I got to give that test on Friday before break because they'll forget it all. When I started shifting my teaching to try to push for long-term retention, that's when my kids really started to learn. And there's a lot. It also means that as a team, we focus on some essentials. Now, you still teach a vast majority of the curriculum, but you can't ensure that all kids learn a vast majority of the curriculum. But if you've got this amount of essentials you work on as a team, you can go a little bit deeper into those essentials, spend a little bit more time on them, but as a team, you can improve your instruction. And let's not forget we intervene and we enrich for kids, right? We make learning the constant and we vary the time and support for kids. And to do that, you got to spend some time intervening if kids didn't learn it the first time, and you got to spend time enriching then for the kids that did learn it the first time. Finally, my favorite part, community. This is where it all comes together. This is where being at a PLC school feels incredible. This is traditional school structure. Right? You've got Big Brother watching you, that's our central office. You have your administrator, they have APs, and then you've got strategists, and you've got teachers, but everybody's kind of sort of in charge of somebody, and they're in charge of certain things, and we've got a hierarchy. You cannot keep a PLC going within a hierarchy. You can't be evaluating people while at the same time being learning partners with them. It simply doesn't work that way. So our traditional structures really interfere and get in the way. And so I asked this question, is this really a community? And I don't believe it is. Let me show you what an illustration of a community would look like. Notice everybody's equal distance from the center. And when you really get into PLC work, you'll learn about things like vision, mission, collective commitments, goals, and norms. But those are all kind of at the center. And they're not owned by one person, they're owned by everybody. But every single person is connected to everyone else. And what those lines mean, you'll notice, is support. Learning, feedback, coaching, helping. Every person helps everybody else. Now, are there some circles that have more influence at a school than others? Sure. The principal has a big say in what happens in the building, so their circle is larger. The central admin, the central office has a big circle. They have a lot of influence. But look, they're connected to everybody else. Everybody needs to help everybody else in that learning culture. Nobody is here and here. We are all equal distance from the center. Can you imagine what that empowerment feels like? That you can go to your principal and say, I'm not sure if this was the right approach. Here's what I think. What do you think? If everybody could do that, we would have some incredible cultures of learning at our schools. Here's what they don't tell you. You really have to reimagine school structures. You can't keep the same traditional hierarchical structures to be a PLC. It just doesn't work that way. You got to have courage to change, and not just the leaders. Everyone has to have courage to change. And you've got to start doing those actions that will lead to create that community of learners. And this is my final say on PLC, and this is what I really love. This is the benefit of following these principles and mindsets. If everyone's a professional, there's continuous improvement because we use research and evidence in a clinical way to improve teaching and learning for kids. All the time. It never stops. It's beautiful, actually, to try new things all the time and see what works and what doesn't. Learning leads to no judgment. Imagine going to work and not feeling judged by everyone. Imagine not having to judge yourself now. Everybody's learning from everybody else, and there's no judgment involved. Imagine if the teacher who's struggling with classroom environment isn't judged by everybody, but assisted and helped by everybody. But here's the cool part. At the same time, we're learning from that person. They're valuable. They have things that they can teach us as well. That no judgment culture. And finally, community. That's really where the love comes in. We love our work and we love each other. And it all comes down to love. When we're equal distance from the center, it puts us in the right frame of mind to love everybody else because they're human beings. And imagine going to a school where there's continuous improvement, no judgment, and you love coming to work. If you've got that going for you, you have created a professional learning community. But here's the deal. It takes a little bit of words. You got to set it up, right? You got to let people know, hey, this is what we got to do. Let's talk about the actions we have to take. But it takes a whole lot of action from everybody. As leaders, we got to take the actions first. We got to be vulnerable. We got to get up there and try a new instructional technique for a PD rather than just sit and listen to me talk for the first time. And we got to fail at it. We got to show people that we can fail at it over and over and over again, and they can see the progress we're making. And everyone at the school has a responsibility to create the PLC culture through a little bit of words and a whole heck of a lot of actions. All right, our last two techniques in our rookie toolbox, teacher shoutouts and the teacher board. And I've mentioned these in the past. They're actually very simple additions, but they're very powerful. So in general, teacher shoutouts are simply this. You look at what students are writing on their boards and you shout some things out that students are writing on their boards. Now, it kind of depends on what you want to shout out. You could shout out all right answers, things that you agree with, or you could shout out a mix. You could shout out all wrong answers. Now, be really careful with that. Don't do that while you're staring over a kid. See the wrong answer, walk away, and a little bit later shout out the wrong answer. It's like, well, why? Why shout out wrong answers? Well, you're trying to get kids to think, and if you have a great classroom culture going where kids can shout out their thoughts, but not judge other people, and in a controlled way, well, some students might challenge you on what you shout out. Wait, hold on, Mr. Mack, I don't know about that. You've suddenly given whole class feedback for some errors that kids have made. Teacher shoutouts are a great way also to help with revision. Okay, so you want kids to add or change, so you got to kind of point out some things they could add or change. So really the teacher has a very important role when helping with that feedback, and you can do it during the answer response and you can do it during the revision. In addition, the teacher board is also a great way for the teacher to give feedback. So instead of walking around, right, which is very important for the teacher to do, they could be up front writing their own response on their teacher board, and then the feedback will in some way involve showing the students. You could also use the teacher board to write down part of the answer. For example, for a selective start walk, which I'll talk about next week. One thing that I've done to speed up the process with a teacher board that allows me still to walk is I will write down my thoughts, I'll take a picture of it, and I'll put it in the next slide. So when I show students the teacher board, it's still on a whiteboard, right? They still see that, it has the same experience. However, I'm able to give that feedback while still walking around and doing a specific type of walk with myself. So to show these two tools in action, I'm going to go ahead and go through a two-part whiteboard cycle. And to mix things up, I'm going to be doing a cycle in social studies. Let's look at our first whiteboard cycle. The element is going to be a chunk of text, and it's going to be an excerpt from a Martin Luther King speech. The interaction. So I'm going to have ready position, so students have their name, they have their board out. It's going to be closed boarding now, so students tip their board up. I don't want them to see what anyone else is writing. One important piece to this interaction is I'm going to actually have students mirror my board, and I'm going to divide my board into 3 different sections. Now notice how important that is. Students are only going to fill in 2 of the sections, and that third section is going to be left blank, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. And I'm going to give them a task, and here's their task. List the 2 most likely actions Martin Luther King would be taking today based upon this speech. You got to give those expectations, things like full sentences. You could give sentence stems to help them. There's a lot of other tools you could do, but this is the general idea of here's what the interaction is going to be. 2 likely actions MLK would be taking in today's world based on what he said in this speech. While students are doing that, I'm going to fill out my teacher board. And I'm actually going to list 3 things down. 2 of them are going to be correct, and 1 of them will be an error. And you can see their error boarding. That's in the professional toolbox, and I'm going to spend a whole session on that later on. But I'm going to make 2 correct actions that MLK would take, and 1 that is definitely not supported by the text. In fact, the text would probably refute that step. Now, when I'm done doing that, I'm going to give myself some teacher shout outs. So I'll probably just walk around and shout out what some kids are putting down on their boards. I'm going to do a different type of feedback in the professional toolbox, and that is student leaderboards. So in my teams, I have a designated student leader, and they have an oversized board. And that student has responded with two things as well. They're going to hold it up to everyone. They're going to do a whiteboard talk. They're going to explain what they wrote down. Now, the student's job in their revision is they're going to add to their board, and they have to pick to either add the first one the student leader wrote or the second one the student leader wrote. And so they'll have two of their own and then one from a student leader. The student leader, on the other hand, is then going to kind of look around at everyone else's boards, and they're going to pick a new one to add onto their board. So this is just a way to mix up that feedback, a way to empower some of your student leaders in your classroom, and to get students to add a good example to their board. We've come to the end of that. So now our students are going to erase the boards, and I'll say something like, okay, 5 seconds, erase your boards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ready positions. Now I'm going to bring in a new element. My teacher board is actually going to be the new element. And on my teacher board, there are 3 different actions. 2 of them that are correct based on the speech, and 1 of them that is not. And it could be the first one, second one, or a third one. And so now here's the interaction students are going to take with that as an element. We're going to do some closed boarding again, so they're going to tip their boards back, but here's the task they need to complete. Once again, I'm going to have students mirror my board. I'm going to divide it into 3 sections, and I now have an error board. 2 of them are correct, 1 of them is an error, and students have to agree or disagree. Is this supported by what's in the text, or is it not supported by what's in the text? And then I'm going to give them that sentence stem and starter where number 1 is or is not supported because it says blank in line blank of the text. And students need to do this for all 3. So they look at the teacher's responses, and now we're bringing that up to that higher level of thinking. They're going to need to evaluate, and they're going to need to cite in their text whether they agree or disagree with the teacher's actions. And yes, I would tell them that 1 of them is definitely not right. You don't have to do that, but I like to do that. Okay, so while students are doing that, I'm assessing the standard for citing. So I'm going to wait till students are done with at least the first one. Then I'm going to go around and I'm going to collect some data. Now I'm going to do that. I might take some notes, but also I could go and take pictures of certain students that I really want to work with. And so that way I can collect some data. While I'm doing that, well, I'm not going to just take pictures and do nothing. I can shout out some things that students are putting on their boards, perhaps to help other students when I'm done taking my data. No whiteboard cycle is complete without some feedback and revision. And so what I'm going to do is I actually have a pre-made teacher board that I took a picture of, and that's the correct answer, and I'm going to flash that up on the screen so students can see it. Okay, number 1 was correct because of this, number 2 was an error because of this, number 3 was correct because of this, and they've followed my format successfully, and now students are going to change their response based on what they see from what I did. That's not the best feedback and revision, but it's a nice way to finish up. I don't want my students to have finished this without at least looking and thinking about my correct answers and changing their boards to match it. And here's the cool thing about it. If students aren't able to do this process and they've changed their boards, I still have my picture data that shows me the students that were struggling with this technique, and now I can pull them later on for small group and really work specifically on this skill. All right, that's it. You are now professional boarders. Congratulations. We have learned about all of these techniques. I hope you've given some of them a try. However, this is a pursuit of trying to use new strategies in classrooms that you'll have throughout your entire career. However, we do need to celebrate, and so let's turn on the celebratory music. Let's celebrate the only way I know how, with some Harry Potter themed celebration. Congratulations. There it is, our professional toolbox. Next week I'm going to narrow our focus into those feedback blocks, and we're going to look at each one of those in a little bit more depth and detail. All right, thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you have a great week at school, and I will talk to you soon.